The idea that most of us have about haunted houses comes from movies, but what does it look like in real life? Well, I don't really know exactly, and I'm sure that each case is different, but I spoke to someone who grew up in a haunted house, and she told me what her experience was like.
Okay, so my father's house growing up, right? Very haunted house. Um, it didn't necessarily affect any of the other family members. It was mostly attacking me because everybody was shocked when I would tell them what was going on with me. So the earliest memory I have, I was about 5 or 6 years old. I went into a closet with my little brother and we were playing hide and go seek. And I felt a hand on my shoulder. And I remember I turned to him and said, "Do you have your hand on my shoulder?" And he said, "No." And so I put my hand over top of the hand that was on my shoulder. The hand was like adult size. It wasn't little, but when I put my hand there, I could still feel my hand and the other hand, but there was nothing there. Like I was able to touch my shoulder. So I automatically freaked out, jumped out, ran out of the room. That was one of the first experiences I ever had. So there was another time as well. My brother used to play hockey when we were kids, and him and my dad would leave the house, so I would be left alone in the house. And I remember I was watching TV. I heard like a huge crash downstairs. And I got really scared. I thought someone broke into my house. We lived out in the country also, so it was very quiet out there. And the panic started settling in. My heart was beating. I actually went and grabbed a butcher knife. I was so scared. I thought someone had broken into my house. So I decided, I don't know where I got this from, but I was like, I'm going to go check downstairs. Logically, right? Something must have fallen. Maybe my cat jumped on a shelf and knocked something over. So I went downstairs. I went to go look in the house. There was nothing there. Nothing had fallen over. And it was a huge crash. So I was looking through the rooms. I went to the back of the room in the basement, flicked on the light, and the light bulb burnt out. Like it exploded. Just this big, like, and right then and there, I was like, okay. I just turned around and walked back upstairs. While I'm upstairs, again, I still have this butcher knife. I'm scared at this point, obviously. I don't know what's going on. Then I start hearing something else, like a weird noise, a zooming noise. Like, this is when I decide to call my friend. I call her on the phone. I'm so scared. I'm holding this butcher knife. I'm terrified. I'm asking her, my house is haunted. I'm telling her, I don't know what to do. I'm hearing noises and bangs and the light bulb burnt out. Then I'm hearing it again, the noise. It's stopping and going and stuff. I realize it's coming from upstairs in the hallway. So I walk over to this hallway. It's a dark hallway leading to a back room. I decide, okay, like I have to go see, I walk down this hallway, turn on the light to the room, and my brother's toy remote control car is spinning in a circle by itself. And I'm just staring at it like I'm in complete shock. Logically, right? I'm thinking in my head, there's someone that broke into my house, came into the room, and is using the remote control to. So I'm looking in the closets for this remote control to figure out who's controlling it. I'm so scared at this point. And eventually I turn to the car and I flip the car over and it stops. And I'm freaking out. I run back to the phone call. I'm still talking to my friend, like, oh my God, my house is so haunted. And then the car starts going again. So I have to go inside of the room, pull the batteries out of the car. I put the batteries down and I'm like, okay, if this turns on again, like I'm going insane. So I run back out into the living room and I sit there. Eventually my brother and my dad show up. And when they showed up, I remember telling them something in this house does not like me. And they just kind of laughed it off, like, oh, Natalie again, because I was always telling these stories of haunting. I was so terrified. And so that was one evening. And then a separate time, I was working out down in my basement. And, working out, I was young and I go upstairs because I forget. I think I was making food or the phone rang or something. So I ran upstairs And when I went back to go back downstairs to go work out again, I went to go inside the room and the door was locked from the inside. So I had left the door open. So something had closed the door and locked it from the inside. So I couldn't get back in. Things like that were happening to me all the time. I was also unfortunately plagued with something called sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is when your brain, I'm diagnosed with this as well, just so you know, but it's when you're still sleeping, but your body wakes up. So your brain is technically asleep and your body is completely paralyzed while you're sleeping. While you're laying down, I can open up my eyes and basically I'm still in like a dream-like state. And in these dream-like states, it's kind of like having a real life nightmare. But oftentimes I only ever see very, very demonic things. One time I woke up from this and I had seen a lady, an old lady, and she had sharp teeth and she was like just very demonic on top of me. I've had many instances also hearing voices, my parents' voices asking me to come help them. And then when I finally get up and out of this like sleep paralysis, I'll ask them, did you call my name? And they'll say no. And I also see a lot of shadowy figures during this time. My dad's house was so terrifying. Even my friends would come over. And I remember there was bangs like on the walls and stuff in my basement. And two of my friends were over and they were like freaking out. Like, what is that, Natalie? Like, where's that coming from? Like, your house really is haunted. And I was like, oh, it's nothing. That happens all the time. Like, to me, it was so normal, these experiences that I was having on a weekly basis, at least, if not daily basis. Bangs on the walls. And so they ended up leaving my house because of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I understand them. I probably would have done the same thing. I have a few questions about the stories that you shared. You shared, a bunch of different stories. The first one I want to touch on is the car zooming. So it's a RC, like remote control car. It doesn't turn by itself, right? So for the car to be able to turn, you need to turn the joystick or whatever, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it had like a remote control to it. It was just a car with a remote control, and you would use the manual like controls to make it spin around.
Okay, and so somehow the remote or the car was being controlled by something, and it was able to spin, which you're not supposed to be able to do, but potentially, maybe the remote is like has the joystick stuck in that position or whatever. But when you flipped the car over and you left, it started up again. Did you mean that the car flipped itself back and it started like driving around again? Is that what you meant?
No, that when I flipped the car over like upside down, it was laying on the carpet, and basically the wheels just started like turning again.
Oh, okay.
So it stopped, like it kept stopped going. I had to take the batteries out
Okay.
because it just was freaking me out so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's quite a lot. But in the beginning, you said that most of these things would happen to you and not to the rest of your family. But it obviously wasn't just you, because when your friends came over, they were also freaked out and they heard some of these things as well. So I don't really understand how that works, but it's quite complicated, at least to me, to figure out how these things function. How could you have heard and seen all these things, but then your family wasn't hearing nearly as much? So I'm very curious about that. You also talked about sleep paralysis, and you talked about one lady, but I don't know if you can really call that a lady, like someone with sharp teeth. But so you're saying your eyes were open. You saw that with your physical eyes?
Yes. Yeah. So I would see like full figures of things as well growing up. And specifically only at my dad's house. It was more like present, more so I would see it. It was like a full figure, like you standing in front of me. Same
Wow.
thing.
Okay. And I also forgot to ask about this. How old were you when these things were happening?
Okay, so the time that I had my hand when I was in the closet. I was about 6 to 7 years old. And when my brother would go to hockey, I was probably around like 10. So when he was at hockey practice and like the things would be crashing, the car was zooming around the room, I was about 10.
Okay.
And also the demonic like lady that I would see, probably around 10, 11 years old. I found there was a big boom in demonic activity after I played with a Ouija board, actually. So around the 6th grade, around 10, 11, 12 years old. And I'll give you another example as well. So one time I was sleeping downstairs in my basement, and this man, like I felt the energy of a man. I don't know if it was a man or not, but it was pitch black in the room, so I couldn't see anything. And I woke up in the middle of the night around 3 a.m, which I do often also. That hour I find is very like active. And I basically heard footsteps sliding back and forth from one side of the room to the other. It came right beside my head, so I really heard it. It was very loud. And then I also heard against my dehumidifier was like patting noises, like banging. And it was so loud, just this pacing and then this bang on my humidifier. I actually got up in the middle of the night. I crawled to the next room to turn the light on. So I crawled on the floor to the next room. The light turned on. Nothing in the room. There was nobody there. All the noise stopped the second I turned the light on. So I thought to myself, maybe the cat's in here. So I started looking for the cat. I walked upstairs to go sleep upstairs because I was just so afraid. And I actually heard the cat meowing outside. So I opened the door and like my cat's outside. So I knew that nobody was downstairs. The cat was not there. I ended up going to sleep upstairs in my room. And I was scared the whole night. And these sleep paralysis, they just got deeper and heavier after the Ouija board experience that I had.